So the next cycle by William Hogarth, produced in the 1730s, first as oil paintings, canvases, and then as prints, is probably the most famous one, definitely the one of which both the paintings and the engravings survive, so we have two versions. I will be showing you the paintings, but if you even go to the Wikipedia page, you can see the two versions, and it's quite interesting to notice that the engravings are a kind of mirror image of the paintings. They are reversed. This was the way to do it, because they were printed on the kind of opposite side of the image. So first the plate was made, and then the prints produced a kind of mirror image of it. So that's why they are reversed. And they tell a story of a man, a young man called Tom Rakewell. The name is quite meaningful, as always with Hogarth cycles. The title of the cycle is A Rake's Progress. A rake is somebody who is careless with the money, a spendthrift. So we have a story of a downfall of a young man who suddenly inherits a lot of money. So the first image shows him soon after the discovery that his father, who was a merchant, left him a lot of money. So soon after the funeral, probably, Tom is being measured for a new suit of clothes, better quality, more fashionable. He is going to live the life of a rich man now. He orders his home to be redecorated, and one of the first things he does is to break the engagement with his fiancée, Sarah Young, by trying to pay her some money to just clear off. And we have Tom with Sarah crying, holding a ring in her hand, visibly pregnant, so probably he impregnated her and promised to marry her, but now he's backing away because he's a rich man and she is just a working class girl. We see her mother pointing to some love letters that Tom wrote to Sarah, but to no avail. This poor girl will feature repeatedly in the cycle, and she will be like the only friend at last in Tom's life. But he's a rake, he is a villain, he is an egoist who doesn't care about other people. So his father, on top of that, probably was also a miser. If you look close, you can find a cat. A very poor-looking cat who tries to find something to eat in this household. So it also signifies that that the man who died was a stingy old miser. There is a portrait of him on the wall counting money. So once again, look for details, find more details. There are so many interesting little meaningful things here in those images. So episode 2, the levee. The levee is a kind of morning appointment, very fashionable among the aristocracy, taken really from Versailles. This is what the King of France would do. He would have some people over for breakfast, and here we have Tom surrounded by all kinds of men who want to sell him something. So there is a music teacher, there is a dancing teacher, there is a fencing instructor, and another sporting instructor. for some sort of self-defense pole fighting. There is a jockey with a trophy from horse races, so probably he wants some money initially. There is a soldier in a red coat offering his services as a bodyguard. So we have all these people who have sniffed that Tom has money. He is fashionably dressed. He's still wearing his nightcap, because the fashionable way to carry would be to wear a wig. So he's not yet fully dressed, but he is getting dressed into fashionable clothes. He lives in a fashionable larger house, and he is basically pestered by all those hangers-on, some of them in the French fashion, like the dancing instructor, so foreign and probably dishonest. So all kinds of people want to have a piece of his fortune. What does Tom do? First thing he decides to do probably is to go to a brothel and to have a party. And episode 3 shows him at an orgy in some brothel with lots of women, with lots of alcohol. He is completely drunk, and the prostitutes steal his belongings. They steal his pocket watch. So an interesting thing is that apparently Hogarth knew the underworld quite well, and the places that he shows are real places in London. So this is apparently a very famous or infamous brothel in Covent Garden called the Rose. So here we have something that could very well have happened. So, of course, it's a fictitious story about a fictitious young man, but we can easily imagine a similar story happening in real life. So, a young man inheriting a large sum of money, having no advisors, having no real friends, spending the money carelessly. What happens in image 4? What could happen, of course, he's arrested for debt, and if you could not pay your debts, you could even be thrown to prison, but you'll see in a little while. So he is stopped in the street while he is being carried in some sort of one-person taxi called a sedan chair, so like a box that the porters would carry, so even without a horse, so you could actually maneuver all those narrow streets of old London. So he is dressed very fashionably with a wig on his head, and we can see St. James's Palace, one of the royal residences, in the background. So very likely he was invited for a ball at the royal court, but suddenly the bailiffs grab him for debt. And one person who tries to stop the arrest is Sarah, the unfortunate spurned fiancée. She's a street seller. She has some ribbons and other millinery items on her, so you can see she's working. She's an honest young woman. She's working selling things, and she tries to save Tom from being arrested for debt. And what happens later? He will not go to prison straight away. He will take one last chance, and he will find a wife, a rich wife, somebody to marry and to pay off his debts. And we see in image 5 the marriage ceremony between Tom and an older woman, a visibly older woman, but probably she has the money. Tom is not very interested in his wife. He seems to cast a sideward glance towards a pretty maid that accompanies the bride. This is one of the quick marriages, the so-called Fleet marriages, because they were in the district of Fleet in London, around Fleet Street. Because to be legally married, you would have to go through all the procedure, including the crying of the banns, so the formal announcement, at least 3 weeks before the wedding. And he needs the money now. And this older woman, who is an old maid, probably, or maybe a widow, but probably a spinster, she wants a husband now, so they will go to this barely official, sometimes it could be contested really, wedding ceremony to be very quickly married, so she can have a husband and he can have her money. In the background we see Sarah with her baby and her mother trying to rush into the church to stop the wedding, perhaps to plead that he promised marriage to her, but they are stopped by some I don't know, friends perhaps of the bride, or maybe even Tom himself. What will happen later? Will the forced marriage to an rather unattractive woman save Tom's finances? Not for long, because in image 6 he is gambling in one of gentlemen's clubs in London, the club called White's Club in St. James's, which is a fashionable club for gentlemen, but apparently in the 18th century this could very easily degenerate into something of a gambling den. So we have gentlemen playing cards and dice for money, being so engrossed in this vice that they do not even pay attention that there is a fire starting somewhere in the background. So they continue to gamble, and Tom, who is in the foreground, looking very distressed and waving his fist at the heavens, probably again lost all his money. He is very distressed, he's cursing, and he threw off his wig. That's why you can see his bald head and the wig lying next to him on the floor. That's what will happen. So next time he loses the money, nothing will save him from debtor's prison. There was a special prison called Fleet Prison in central London, where you would be sent if you could not pay your debts. So he is in prison, being visited by both his wife, who is a kind of nagging presence next to him, and poor Sarah, who actually fainted on meeting him. And he looks quite distressed. He looks probably as if he is starting to lose his sanity, because even in the prison, and this is the real thing that happened, you had to pay money for slightly better lodgings, for slightly better food. So we have people like this boy here with a tray of food pestering Tom to pay some more debts that he made even within the prison walls. So he looks very distressed, and what will happen is that in the end he will be relocated from Fleet Prison to the notorious, infamous Bedlam, which is Bethlehem Hospital for the Insane, the mental asylum. And we see Tom stripped naked We do not really know why. Maybe he had to give all his belongings, including his clothes, to his debtors. Or maybe he is so deranged that he stripped himself naked. He looks completely numb and completely insane. And only Sarah is at his side crying as he dies. There are some, I would say, quite disturbing things happening in the background, and especially a party of fashionable young women dressed in, there's this one in this pink dress, and you might ask yourself, what is she doing here? Is she a visitor? Is she visiting one of the patients? No, she came to the mental asylum for fun, to laugh at the mad people, because mad people are funny. You can see some of the patients there, one of them sitting and pretending to be a pope, and another one playing some musical instrument. So yes, for the mid-18th century mind, this could be a leisure activity, like a circus. This is something that Hogarth also criticizes in his cycle, and in the 18th century, luckily, this inhuman leisure activity came out of fashion for good, and the treatment of the mentally ill improved. Also because of the illness of King George III. So we have this very sad story about a young man who squandered the money, who squandered the opportunities, and basically ruined his life because of his egoism and foolishness, and within a few years he was mad and dead, well, he died miserable. But again, there are little stories, there are little things that are humorous, and there is a lot of humor, like those pompous professionals that want to be hired by Tom in the second part, or the dogs, the little doggies. Yes, look for animals, little doggies in the marriage scene. So probably these are the doggies that maybe belonged to the bride, because she was a spinster, and there was this stereotype that unmarried women love their pets more than people, but evidently this is some sort of funny commentary on the marriage, on the couple getting together and being linked in matrimony. So that's the second one. The third one is Mariage à la mode, and it's a 6-part story about a failed marriage. So here we have two people ruining their lives, the bride and groom, and only the paintings survived, or at least I've never seen the engraving versions of that. You can still see the paintings in the National Gallery in London. They are not very big, they're like kind of this size. And of course, once again, they are full of interesting little details, and everything is meaningful. So I'll just go very quickly through this story. If you follow the course on the history of the family in the 18th and 19th centuries, I talked about it already there. But you can also find other close-ups and discussions, and try to find some little detail that I omit, okay? I will omit them knowingly, so we have something to discuss. So the first part, the marriage settlement. The fathers signed the contract. One of the fathers, the groom's father, is an aristocrat with the title, but no money. He overspent the money on the palace that we can see outside the window. And the father of the bride is a rich merchant, so he has the money, but he doesn't have the status, and he would like to have a noble title in his family. So they decide to unite their children by marriage, and we have the prospective bride and groom sitting together, but completely uninterested in each other. The young man is admiring his image in a mirror, and the young woman is actually flirting with one of the lawyers. We also have the dogs. Two dogs linked together, their collars linked together, but otherwise completely uninterested. Then we have the second part, called the tete-a-tete, so kind of face-to-face, or shortly after the marriage, or in the morning. There are several titles for these paintings. Anyway, this is the scene in the new palace after the wedding and after a party. It looks like there has been a party. There is some overturned furniture and some music notes on the floor. There are servants trying to tidy the room, and one of them in the foreground is carrying a big bunch of bills to be paid. The wife, the Duchess, seems to be quite happy and content with her new life, but the husband looks like he was not present. He just returned after a night out somewhere else with some other people. So he is wearing the outdoor clothes in the morning. So apparently he just arrived. And there is a doggy. Mind the doggy. The doggy sniffed something in the pocket of his coat. And this is a female cap, a female head decoration. Apparently the man was spending time in the company of another woman. Part 3, the inspection, or a visit to a quack doctor. So a very disreputable medical office with a man, probably a doctor, and the count or earl, the husband, in the office holding a box of pills, and there is another box of pills on the chair between his legs, and there is yet another third box of pills held by this very young girl, like a child really. And if you look close, you start noticing those black sores on the face of the husband, on the face of the older woman who accompanies him and the girl herself is holding a handkerchief to the corner of her mouth. So what happened? The husband is infected with syphilis, and very probably he tried to follow the worst advice ever, really, and to have sex with a virgin. So this young girl was sold, probably by an older woman, as a prostitute to this young man, with hopes of curing his disease, but rather than cure him, she contracted the disease herself. This is how it works, of course. So the man has now to secure the pills for himself and for the girl as well. And this is a horrible disease. They didn't have antibiotics. This was the disease that would basically kill you in the end, but before it would drive you insane. This was the disease that could be transmitted to an innocent wife and also to a child in her womb. So this is what happens. This marriage is really going to crash. Episode 4, the toilette, or also the lever, the morning lever. So a breakfast party, this time held by the Duchess. So we have the lady herself in her boudoir, in her private apartment, surrounded by her fashionable friends, entertained. So we have musicians, we have a singer, we have servants, black-skinned servants. So she also has those fashionable exotic servants serving coffee or chocolate perhaps, and unpacking boxes of some trinkets. And one of the guests is the lawyer from the first episode, the counselor. His name, we know his name, Silver Tongue. Yes, so he knows his way with words, and now he holds the invitations to a masked ball. So he invites the Duchess to go to a fancy dress party with him. So probably he is her lover. And the last two images show what will happen in the end. Of course, everybody will die. So the fifth one, the bagno, is like an inn, a very disreputable inn, a place you would rent a room if you had an illicit affair. So this is the place where the Duchess went after the ball with her lover, and they were surprised by the husband. Apparently the men fought and the husband was mortally wounded. We can see him dying, we can see the wife pleading for forgiveness while the lover escapes through the window. And the last one shows the lady's death, the Duchess or the Countess's death, and she committed suicide. Her husband is dead. Her lover was apprehended and hanged. There is a newspaper with the information of his execution. She is back in her father's house, and she took poison. So that's what happens. We see a dog, a very poor-looking, starving dog, in the house of the Countess's father, trying to steal some food from the table, just as the merchant, the father, steals the wedding ring from his daughter's finger as she lays dying, saying goodbye to her baby who has this nasty syphilitic sore. So this is a horrible story, of course told in a very, I would say, typical Hogarthian way, with the use of animals, with the use of humor, with the use of irony. So this is something that really made his name. This is something that really made this man the greatest artist of the 18th century. Someone who was interested in common people, someone who was interested in daily life, in contemporary vices, in contemporary problems, we continue our discussion of the 18th century next week. Thank you.